Welcome. And thank you for listening to a great, emotionally rich story on the Black Stories 365 channel. Drop it now. Drop the weapon. Officer Rick Malloy's voice split the stillness of the night, harsh and commanding. The kind of voice that could stop a man's heartbeat. Blue and red lights strobed across the quiet Virginia Beach neighborhood, washing over the porch of the Anderson home. Inside, the clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. 15-year-old Rachel Anderson stood frozen at the top of the stairs, her bare feet cold on the hardwood. She had been half asleep moments ago, roused by voices and the barking of her dog, Maggie. Now she clutched her phone, a black case, shiny under the flickering hallway light, trying to call her father's number. Before her mind could process what was happening, a gunshot shattered the world. The sound was deafening in the narrow hallway. The phone spun from her hand, hitting the wall, the bright screen flickering before it fell face up on the floor. A single drop of blood splashed across the glowing image of her father smiling in uniform. Rachel gasped, one hand flying to her shoulder. Maggie barked wildly, her nails skittering on the tile as she lunged forward. "Rachel!" Linda Anderson screamed, her voice breaking as she ran from the kitchen, still in hospital scrubs from her night shift. Officer Kevin Grant froze on the porch, eyes wide behind his rookie's uncertainty. "Oh, God," he whispered. But Malloy's shadow loomed larger, gun still raised. She had something in her hand. He barked. She pointed it. "It's a phone," Linda shouted, dropping to her knees beside her daughter, pressing her palm against the wound. "You shot my baby, she's a child." The door to the master bedroom flew open. Cmdr Mark Anderson stepped out, barefoot, wearing fatigue pants and a gray t-shirt. His voice carried the weight of 20 years in uniform, calm but dangerous. "Officer, holster your weapon," he said evenly. His posture was steady, but every muscle in his body coiled for control. He took in the scene, his daughter bleeding, his wife on the floor, two armed officers on his porch, and something inside him turned to steel. Malloy's eyes flicked to him. "Sir, stay back." She was armed. "You fired without identification," Mark replied. "You're in my home. Put the gun down." Maggie barked again, low and warning, standing protectively over Rachel. The porch light above them buzzed, throwing shadows across Malloy's face. Kevin Grant's hand trembled as he tried to raise his radio, but Malloy's growl cut him off. "Don't touch that," he hissed. "We'll handle this ourselves." "Your radio's off," Mark said. "That's a violation of procedure." His tone was quiet, but it sliced through the chaos like a knife. "Body cams on. Now." Grant swallowed hard and clicked his on. The tiny red light blinked to life. Malloy's hand hesitated on his holster, caught between pride and fear. Linda pressed against Rachel's wound. The bleeding slowed, but the girl's breathing came in short, terrified bursts. "Stay with me, honey," she whispered. Rachel's eyes fluttered open. I just wanted to call Dad." The words barely rose above a breath, but they hung in the air like a verdict. Malloy flinched, a flicker of doubt crossing his features, but his jaw tightened. "She moved fast. Looked like a gun." Grant spoke, voice shaking. "Sir, it was a phone. Look at it." He pointed at the black rectangle lying on the floor, glowing faintly where it had fallen near the baseboard. The screen showed a missed call. "Dad." "Holster your weapon," Mark repeated, taking a slow step forward, hands open, palms visible. "You will not aim a firearm in my home again." The commander's voice was steady, precise, the same tone that had once directed men through firefights overseas. Malloy hesitated, then finally lowered his weapon, the barrel dipping toward the floor. The tension in the hallway shifted. The roar of silence returned. Outside, the sirens were fading as other calls drew units away. Only the faint hum of the porch light and the dog's labored panting filled the air. "Kevin," Mark said, eyes never leaving Malloy. "Call your supervisor." "Sergeant Whitaker, correct?" "Yes, sir," Grant stammered. "Do it." Grant stepped aside, pressing his radio, voice cracking as he reported the incident. Malloy turned away, muttering under his breath, pacing like a trapped animal. Linda kept whispering to her daughter. "You're okay, baby. I've got you. You're okay." Rachel's eyes rolled toward the fallen phone. Its case glistened darkly in the light. The camera app was still open, capturing fragments of the scene, the boots, the blood, the trembling hands. Linda's mind raced. She remembered something: the doorbell camera outside. Without speaking, she reached into her pocket, pulled out her own phone, and opened the app. With one tap, she saved the footage. The tiny progress bar completed. Saved. Mark caught her eye. No words passed, but understanding did. He straightened. "Officer Malloy," he said evenly. "For the record, you entered this residence without a warrant, discharged your firearm without identification, and tampered with radio communication. Is that correct?" Malloy spun around, face red. "Don't lecture me, Commander. I was doing my job." "Your job," Mark said quietly, "is to protect civilians, not to terrorize them." For a heartbeat, neither man moved. Then a distant siren sounded again, closer this time. "Back up." The blue lights outside brightened through the blinds. Malloy exhaled, shoulders dropping. "This isn't over," he muttered. "No," Mark replied. "It's not." He knelt beside his daughter, pressing a towel to her wound. "Rachel, stay awake, you hear me?" Her voice was thin but steady. "It hurts, Dad." "I know, sweetheart, you're going to be fine." He brushed her hair from her face, forcing a calm he didn't feel. His hands were steady, the hands of a man trained never to shake, even under fire. Grant crouched beside Linda. "Ma'am, the ambulance is en route. Hold pressure. Don't move her arm." His eyes met Mark's, guilt etched across his face. "I'm so sorry, sir. I told him to wait." Mark didn't answer. He simply nodded once, acknowledging the apology without forgiving it. Outside, tires crunched on the gravel driveway. Another patrol car. The glow of headlights painted the walls. Sergeant Whitaker's voice crackled through the open radio. "Unit 12, report." Mark rose slowly, his shadow tall against the stairwell wall. The home smelled of smoke, metal, and fear. Maggie whined softly, pressing her muzzle against Rachel's uninjured hand. "Good girl," Rachel whispered. Mark looked toward the doorway, where dawn's first hint of gray touched the edge of the curtains. He'd been home barely 72 hours from his last deployment. In Afghanistan, he'd learned to distinguish danger from confusion, threat from misunderstanding. Here, in his own country, the lines had blurred. "Stay with her," he told Linda, and stepped forward as Whitaker entered, his face grim beneath the brim of his cap. "What the hell happened here?" the sergeant asked. Malloy started talking fast, defensive, pointing toward the stairs. Mark didn't interrupt. He let the man speak, let the lies pile up, let the scene record itself on every active body cam. Truth didn't need shouting, it needed evidence. He turned once more toward Rachel. Her eyelids fluttered, but she managed a faint smile. "Dad, you came home." "Always," he said. And for the first time that night, the commander's voice broke. The red and blue lights reflected off the glass-framed photo of Mark and Rachel at her 8th grade graduation, now lying cracked on the floor. Outside, the wind stirred the flag hanging from the porch beam, its edges frayed but unfallen. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded into silence. In its wake, the sound of a father's breathing filled the room, measured, steady, refusing to break. 6 hours earlier, the Anderson house had smelled of butter and burnt pancakes, not gunpowder. The morning sun slanted through the kitchen blinds, catching dust motes that danced above the breakfast table. Linda Anderson stood barefoot, still in her light blue scrubs from the night before, flipping a last pancake while the coffee machine hummed behind her. "You always burn the first one," she said over her shoulder. Mark laughed, sitting at the table in a navy t-shirt, sipping from a chipped mug that read, USS Arlington. "It's tradition. Keeps me humble." Rachel rolled her eyes, scrolling her phone between bites of fruit. "Mom, you should make Dad do night shifts. Then he'll understand why you forget sugar in the coffee." 8-year-old Sam giggled, mouth full of syrup. Maggie thumped her tail under the table, watching every crumb like a sentry. It was the kind of ordinary morning they hadn't had in half a year. Mark had returned from deployment only 3 days earlier. His duffel bag still sat half unpacked by the stairs, his boots by the door. He'd promised himself this time would be slower, quieter. "So," Linda said, setting the pancake on his plate. "What's the first thing you want to do now that you're home?" "Fix that squeaky garage door," Mark said. "It's been threatening national security for months." She smiled. "That's what retirement looks like, huh? WD-40 and pancakes." He reached for her hand, the gesture small but grounding. For a moment, everything felt safe again. By early afternoon, Linda had gone to the hospital for her double shift. Mark stayed home, tinkering in the garage. Maggie sprawled at his feet. The garage door groaned each time it opened. "You and me, old friend," he murmured to it, turning the wrench. Across the street, retired Air Force veteran Frank Davenport watered his lawn, waving occasionally. Frank lived alone. His hearing aid whined softly when the mower started. "That thing's going to fall on your car one day," he shouted. "It'll be fine," Mark replied. "I've seen worse in Kandahar." The old man chuckled, shaking his head. Mark didn't notice that the groan of the garage echoed down the block just enough to rattle a few nerves. Later that night, clouds rolled in over the ocean. Rachel finished her homework at the kitchen counter, earbuds in, humming softly. Sam fell asleep in front of a cartoon rerun. Maggie curled beside him. Mark grilled leftover chicken for sandwiches, flipping them with military precision. The smell of rain crept through the open window, mingled with the scent of grilled meat. Around 10:30, Linda called from the hospital break room. "You guys surviving?" "Barely," Mark said, smiling. "Your daughter tried to convince me kale belongs in sandwiches." "It does," Rachel shouted from the counter. Linda laughed. "I'll be home late. Double shift again. Save me a piece of that chicken." "Always," Mark replied, echoing words he'd said on the tarmac before every deployment. After the call, the house settled into that special kind of quiet TV hum, rain on windows, the tick of the hallway clock. Around midnight, Mark stood on the porch, looking at the flag they'd hung earlier that week. He adjusted the rope so it wouldn't slap the pole. The street was still, lined with trimmed hedges and pickup trucks. Across the road, Frank's lights flickered out. Mark thought of the years he'd spent overseas, the times he'd imagined this peace. He'd never thought danger could come wearing a badge. Inside, Rachel's phone buzzed with social media notifications. Then fell silent. She scrolled through photos her dad in uniform, her mom laughing at the kitchen sink. They look so normal, she thought, smiling. At 1:15 a.m., Linda texted. "Leaving soon. Might grab coffee first." Rachel typed back. "Be safe." She left the phone charging on her nightstand. At 1:50, the security light above the porch flickered. Maggie lifted her head, ears pricked. The dog padded toward the window, growled softly, then lay back down. In the dim garage, the half-fixed door creaked again as the wind picked up. The motion sensor pinged, sending a short alert to the neighbor's security app. On the other end of the block, Frank Davenport stirred awake. He'd been dreaming of Desert Storm's old memories from years gone by. Hearing the metallic groan, he frowned and reached for his phone. "Suspicious noise," he muttered, tapping 911. "Possible break-in, same house as last time, the one with the Navy guy." The dispatcher thanked him, typing briskly. In another part of town, Officer Rick Malloy grunted when the call came through. "What's the address?" he asked. "Beechwood Court. Near the base." Malloy sighed. "Again?" His partner, Officer Kevin Grant, glanced over from the passenger seat. "Could just be wind, sir. Or another welfare check that turns ugly," Malloy replied, flipping on the lights. He'd been on the force 18 years. He liked control. He hated being questioned. As the cruiser rolled toward the cul-de-sac, he muttered, "Let's handle this quick. No circus." "Should I notify the supervisor?" Grant asked. "It's protocol for suspected trespass after midnight." "We don't need Whitaker for this," Malloy snapped. 2 minutes and we're done." He flicked his radio off when static crackled. "That thing's useless anyway." The rain had stopped, leaving everything slick and glistening under the streetlights. The Andersons' driveway gleamed like a mirror. Inside, Mark had fallen asleep on the couch, TV murmuring low. Maggie snored beside him, her head heavy on his foot. At 2:20, Linda's car headlights appeared down the street. She parked quietly, not wanting to wake the kids. Her bones ached from 12 hours of work. She gathered her bag, locked the car, and stretched, eyes half closed. The sound of tires crunching made her turn. A police cruiser idled at the curb, lights reflecting off her windshield. She frowned, puzzled. The officers stepped out. "Evening, ma'am," Malloy said, flashlight already in hand. "Everything okay?" Linda nodded, trying to smile. "Yes, officer. Just got off work. We got a call about suspicious activity, garage noises." "You live here?" "Yes, my husband and kids." "Step aside, please." "Excuse me?" "Step aside." His tone was sharp, practiced. The beam of light swept her face, making her squint. "Sir, this is my property. My husband. We'll need to verify that." Kevin shifted uneasily. "Sir, maybe we should." "Quiet, rookie," Malloy snapped. He pushed past Linda toward the porch. The screen door creaked. Maggie barked from inside, deep and protective. Mark stirred on the couch, frowning. "Linda?" he called, half awake. Linda stepped between Malloy and the door. "You don't have a warrant," she said firmly. "This is a misunderstanding. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear." Malloy's hand rested on his holster. "Ma'am, stand back. You're scaring my dog and my kids are asleep." "Then wake them up." His voice was ice. Kevin's throat tightened. "Sir, let's call it in. The garage door probably." "Enough." Malloy's flashlight caught the family portrait on the wall through the window. Mark in uniform. Medals glinting. He sneered. "Navy money. Huh? Must be nice." The comment landed like an insult. Linda's face hardened. "That's service, not money." Mark stood in the doorway now, every inch of him awake. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked calmly. Malloy's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" "Commodore Mark Anderson, U.S. Navy. This is my home." For a moment, neither moved. Rainwater dripped from the porch roof. Kevin's voice was a whisper. "Sir, please let's de-escalate." But the night was already tilting toward tragedy. Malloy stepped forward, flashlight trembling slightly. "Then prove it," he said. The words were almost a challenge. Inside the hallway, Rachel stirred at the sound, Maggie's growl rising again. In the far distance, thunder rolled off the ocean, low and patient, like a warning no one heard. Rainwater dripped from the porch awning as Mark Anderson faced the two officers, the smell of damp earth mixing with the faint metallic scent of tension. Linda stood just behind him, arms crossed over her chest, exhaustion sharpening her words. "You're trespassing," she said, voice steady despite her pulse hammering. "I told you, there's no break in here." Officer Rick Malloy ignored her. His flashlight beam cut across the living room, sweeping over family photos and folded flags, catching the gleam of medals in a display case. "Nice collection," he muttered. "Must have cost a fortune." Mark's eyes flicked toward the man. "They cost lives," he replied evenly. "You have no warrant. Leave." The words hung heavy in the air. Officer Kevin Grant shifted, visibly uneasy. He was young, maybe 25. His hand hovering over his radio. "Sir, maybe we should verify with dispatch," he murmured, but Malloy's glare silenced him. "Radio's dead weight tonight," Malloy said. "Too much static." He tapped the unit on his shoulder, a dull click. Mark noticed the body camera on Malloy's vest dark, no blinking light. "Your camera's off," Mark observed. Malloy smirked. "Must have shut off with the static." Mark had heard that tone before. In distant deserts and tense checkpoints, the sound of men who liked power too much. He took a slow breath, forcing calm. "Turn it back on," he said quietly. Malloy stepped closer instead, boots squeaking on the wet floorboards. "You Navy guys think you're untouchable. You come home, flash medals, expect the world to salute. Not tonight." Linda reached for her phone, recording discreetly, her hand trembling. "Rick," Grant said softly. "We should." "Quiet," Malloy barked. "Check the perimeter." Grant hesitated, then moved around the side of the house, his flashlight sweeping through the drizzle. The neighborhood was still, windows dark. In the distance, the hum of the ocean. Inside, Maggie growled, low and protective. "Easy, girl," Mark murmured. "It's okay. Control your animal," Malloy snapped. "She senses threat," Mark said. "Maybe listen to her." The officer's jaw tightened. He stepped toward the staircase, light flashing upward. "Sir, don't go upstairs," Linda said sharply. "My children are sleeping." "Then you'll wake them for me," Malloy said, brushing past her. His shoulder bumped hers, deliberate. Mark moved fast, blocking the stairs. "You don't touch that step," he said. "Not without a warrant." The command in his tone froze the air. Malloy's hand dropped instinctively to his gun. His eyes narrowing. For a heartbeat the two men faced each other, one trained to protect, the other armed by authority but hollowed by arrogance. Kevin Grant reappeared at the front door, rain dripping from his jacket. "Nothing outside, sir. Garage looks fine." Malloy didn't turn. "Maybe inside's different." He pushed forward, bumping Mark's shoulder. "Move." "No," Mark said simply. Linda's voice cut through the room, low and fierce. "Officer, please. My daughter's a child. Let us handle this peacefully. Peaceful ends when people start hiding things." Malloy snapped. He turned the flashlight toward the stairs again. A beam of light swept across the upper landing where Rachel's door stood ajar. A soft chime sounded, her phone vibrating with an incoming text. The tiny sound made Malloy stiffen. "Someone's moving," he muttered. "You stay here." He started up. "Stop," Mark barked. "That's my child's room." Malloy ignored him, boots thudding on the steps. Linda grabbed his sleeve. "Please, she's just—" He jerked his arm free, shouting, "Hands off." Mark's training screamed at him to react, but he stayed still. A sudden wrong move could explode everything. He signaled Linda to step back, eyes on Malloy. "Grant," Mark said, voice calm. "Radio your supervisor. Now." Grant's hand hovered near the button, torn between command and conscience. "Do it," Mark said again. The younger officer swallowed hard, pressing the mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12 requesting supervisor at Beechwood Court, possible escalation." The rest of the message was drowned by a bang upstairs, Rachel's door hitting the wall. Malloy's shout echoed down. "Drop it now. Drop the weapon." Mark's heart stopped. He lunged for the stairs, Linda right behind him. "She's not armed," he yelled. But the sound of the gunshot cut him off, louder than thunder. The world slowed, the smell of cordite, the flash of light. Maggie barking wildly. Mark took the steps 3 at a time. At the top he saw his daughter crumpled against the wall, her phone clattering to the floor, the case cracked. Malloy stood over her, weapon still raised, eyes wide with shock or justification. Grant stumbled in behind them, horrified. "Jesus, Rick, she's a kid!" Linda screamed, sliding to Rachel's side, pressing her hands to the wound. "You shot her. You shot my baby." Malloy's mouth worked soundlessly, then he barked. She had something in her hand. "A phone," Mark said, voice deadly quiet. "You shot my daughter for a phone." He stepped forward, hands raised but gaze locked on the officer. "Put it down, now." "Sir, I saw." "You saw what you wanted to see." Mark's tone was ice. Grant moved quickly, grabbing Malloy's arm. "Sir, holster your weapon." Malloy hesitated, then slowly lowered it, the metal trembling. The room filled with the sound of Rachel's ragged breathing. Linda's scrubs were soaked crimson at the shoulder. "Call an ambulance," she shouted. Grant spoke into his radio, stumbling over words, his voice breaking. "Dispatch officer. Involved shooting civilian down, send EMS now." Mark knelt beside his daughter. "Rachel, stay with me, sweetheart. Look at me." Her eyelids fluttered. "It hurts, Dad." "I know, baby. You're okay." He pressed a towel from the hallway closet against the wound, his motions swift, practiced. "Linda, keep pressure." Maggie whimpered beside them, licking Rachel's fingers. Downstairs, the doorbell camera blinked silently, recording everything: the gun, the blood, the chaos. Linda's phone buzzed in her pocket. She reached for it with shaking fingers, opening the app. With one tap, she saved the footage. Progress bar complete. "Saved," she whispered. Mark heard it, nodded once. "Good." He turned to Grant. "Sergeant Whitaker, ETA?" "5 minutes," Grant said, voice hoarse. "Paramedics are en route." Malloy stood in the corner, staring at his gun as if it had betrayed him. She moved too fast, he muttered. Could have been anything. Mark rose to his full height. It was my daughter, he said. 15 years old. She was calling her father. Malloy's mouth opened, then closed. His shoulders sagged. This isn't over, he mumbled. You're right, Mark said. It's just beginning. Downstairs, the first wail of sirens broke the dawn. Red and blue flashed again through the cracked window, painting the walls like a warning. Grant knelt by Linda, helping her lift Rachel onto the gurney when paramedics arrived. Mark followed them down, hands still stained with blood, heart hammering but mind cold. Outside, the neighbors had begun to gather. Frank Davenport clutching a robe, eyes wide. Someone whispered. It's the Anderson girl. Cameras clicked from across the street. Mark met no one's gaze. As the ambulance doors closed, Linda pressed her forehead to Rachel's hand. You'll be okay, she murmured. You have to be. The vehicle pulled away, siren rising into the pale morning. Mark stood in the driveway, bare feet on wet concrete, watching until the lights disappeared. Then he turned back to the house, where Malloy sat on the porch steps, head in hands, and Kevin Grant stood stiffly beside him, radio crackling. The wind carried the faint sound of the flag flapping above them, frayed but still flying. In that moment, Mark realized the war he thought he'd left overseas had just followed him home. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and coffee, the fluorescent lights casting a pale shine on the linoleum floor. Mark Anderson stood by the vending machine, his hands still trembling despite the rigid posture he tried to maintain. His t-shirt was streaked with Rachel's blood, a crimson map of the night burned into the fabric. Linda sat nearby, elbows on her knees, her head bowed. The rhythmic beeping from the trauma room was steady enough to keep hope alive. She's stable, the nurse had said earlier. The bullet missed the artery, she's lucky. Lucky. The word echoed in Mark's head, twisting with anger. Luck shouldn't decide whether a child lived through a police encounter. Through the glass window, he could see Rachel on the bed. Oxygen tubes in her nose. Her hair damp with sweat. Maggie's collar rested on the bedside table, taken off before they left home. The dog was now at a neighbor's house, pacing restlessly. Mark took a slow breath. He'd spent years in combat zones, but nothing had prepared him for watching his child bleed in her own hallway. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Commander Anderson? A calm voice said. This is Special Agent Denise Morales, FBI Civil Rights Division. We were contacted by the hospital after an officer shooting involving a minor. Are you safe to speak? I'm here, Mark said quietly. My daughter's alive. For now. We're dispatching a team. NCIS is coordinating with your base liaison. We'll need to secure your home before the department does. They'll try to spin it, he said. I know the playbook. Then don't say a word to local investigators until we arrive, Morales replied. You've done this before, Commander. Chain of custody matters. He ended the call, watching Linda as she rubbed her forehead. Federal agents are coming, he said softly. She nodded without looking up. Do you think it'll make a difference? It has to, he said. In the waiting room, Officer Kevin Grant stood by the wall, still in uniform, pale and hollow-eyed. He'd followed the ambulance here, refusing to leave. When he saw Mark, he straightened, guilt etched deep across his face. Sir, he began. You called for help, Mark interrupted. You did the right thing. I should have stopped him, Grant said. He turned his radio off. I should have reported it earlier. You're reporting it now, Mark said, his tone gentler. That's what matters. Grant nodded slowly. Internal affairs will want statements. But they're already closing ranks. Malloy's union rep's been here. They're saying it was justified. Linda lifted her head, eyes red. Justified? He shot a child with a phone. I know, ma'am, Grant said, voice breaking. I know. Mark turned away, pacing. He needed control order. The doorbell camera, he said suddenly. The footage. Did it upload? Linda blinked. Yes. It's on my phone, backed up to the cloud. Good, Mark said. That's our proof. At that moment, a tall man in a gray suit entered the corridor, flashing a badge. Cmdr Anderson? I'm Commander Peter Lawson, NCIS. I've been assigned as liaison until the Bureau arrives. Mark shook his hand firmly. We'll need to preserve everything: doorbell footage, body cams, even the neighbor's security app. Already working on it, Lawson said. I know how departments can lose evidence when it's inconvenient. He turned to Grant. Officer, your body cam, was it active? Grant hesitated. Mine, yes. Malloy's, no. He claimed technical failure. Lawson's expression didn't change. Of course he did. Inside the trauma bay, Rachel stirred. Linda was instantly at her side. Hey, sweetheart, she whispered, brushing her daughter's hair back. Rachel's eyes fluttered open. Mom? I'm here, baby. Where's Dad? Mark stepped into the room. Right here, sweetheart. Is the man gone? She asked weakly. Mark swallowed hard. He won't hurt anyone again. She closed her eyes. I thought it was just a phone, she whispered. It was. Honey. That's all it was. The heart monitor beeped steadily, its rhythm a fragile reminder of life. When Rachel drifted back to sleep, Mark stepped into the hall again. Lawson was talking quietly with Morales, who had just arrived, a composed woman in her 40s, eyes sharp, tone firm. We'll take jurisdiction, she was saying. Civil rights violation, use of excessive force, unlawful entry. There's plenty to start with. You'll need the footage, Mark said, approaching them. My wife saved it before they could tamper with it. We'll extract and mirror it, Morales said. Don't share it online yet. The press will come soon. Let us lock the evidence down first. They'll come either way, Mark said. The story's already spreading. He wasn't wrong. Outside the hospital, cameras were gathering. The news vans had arrived before dawn, lights glaring against the drizzle. Headlines scrolled across TV screens in the waiting room. Teen shot by police mistaken for armed suspect. Navy SEAL's daughter injured in home incident. Linda stared at the screen, disbelief turning to exhaustion. They're calling it an incident, she said softly. Not a shooting. An incident. Mark's jaw tightened. They sanitize everything. They're saying I resisted, she continued. That the house was uncooperative. Mark crouched in front of her, taking her hands. We have proof. They can lie in the dark, but they can't hide from light. Morales glanced at them. He's right. But you'll need patience. The truth moves slower than outrage. We've waited long enough, Linda said. Morales didn't argue. Hours passed. By morning, Rachel was out of surgery, resting. Mark finally stepped outside to breathe. The air was heavy with sea salt, the horizon just beginning to pale. He leaned against the hood of his car, feeling the ache in his shoulders. For the first time since the shot, he let himself tremble. The image replayed: flash of light, her gasp, the sound of the phone hitting the floor. It was burned into him. Commander, a voice said softly. It was Kevin Grant, approaching with a folder. They're suspending me pending review. For telling the truth? Mark asked. For being there, Grant replied bitterly. He handed over the folder. My statement. Every detail. Body cam footages already uploaded. If they try to bury it, I want you to have this. Mark nodded, accepting it. You're a good officer, Grant. Don't let them make you forget that. I just didn't think this could happen here, Grant said quietly. I joined to protect people. So did I, Mark said. Different uniform. Same promise. They stood in silence for a while. The wind off the ocean cutting through the damp morning. Inside the hospital, Linda sat beside Rachel, holding her hand, whispering a prayer she hadn't said since childhood. Keep her safe, Lord. Don't let this be the end of our story. When she looked up, she saw Mark watching through the window. Their eyes met, two weary souls bound by love and fury. The day ahead would bring press conferences, investigations, denials. But for now, in that sterile hallway filled with beeping machines and half-spoken prayers, they clung to the only thing left unbroken. Each other. As the first sunlight touched the horizon, Mark whispered to himself. Justice doesn't shout. It waits. And it remembers. Somewhere in the distance, the flag at the hospital entrance stirred in the morning breeze, catching the light torn at the edges but still flying. By the following afternoon, the Anderson house no longer felt like a home. It had become a scene, cordoned off by yellow tape, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions that no one inside wanted to answer. Mark stood by the porch, arms crossed, watching federal agents move through the living room with quiet efficiency. The bullet hole in the hallway wall had been patched temporarily with a square of clean white plaster, but the stain on the floorboards remained, a dark memory that wouldn't scrub away. Inside, Special Agent Denise Morales reviewed the footage on a laptop. The doorbell camera had caught everything: the flashing lights, the raised gun, the small shape of a teenage girl clutching a phone, the gunshot, and Malloy's face immediately afterward. Blank and unrepentant. "It's clear," she said finally. "There's no weapon. No provocation." The audio picks up the words drop at less than a second before the shot. "That's not procedure. That's panic." "No," Mark said. "That's prejudice." Morales didn't argue. She nodded, copying the file to a secure drive. "We'll have NCIS handle the military side of jurisdiction. The FBI will cover civil rights and excessive force. But you should expect resistance. The department will try to minimize this." Linda entered quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "They already are," she said, setting one beside Morales. The chief released a statement. He called it a tragic misunderstanding during a potential threat response. "They're protecting their own," Mark muttered. Morales looked up at him. "They're protecting their system. That's different. Systems can be changed." Outside, the sound of tires crunching on gravel announced new arrivals: more reporters, more police, more onlookers. Through the window, Mark saw Frank Davenport standing at the edge of his lawn, holding a folded newspaper. Their eyes met for a moment. The old veteran raised a hand in a quiet salute. Mark returned it. Upstairs, Rachel was home from the hospital under medical supervision. Her right arm was in a sling, her shoulder bandaged. She lay propped up in bed, staring at the ceiling. "I heard them say he's suspended," she murmured when her mother entered. "That's all? For now," Linda said gently. "The investigation takes time." "If I had died," Rachel said, "would it still take time?" Linda sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sweetheart, what matters is you didn't. And we're going to make sure what happened to you never happens to another kid." Rachel looked down at her phone, the one that had started it all. The screen was cracked, spiderwebbed across the smiling photo of her and her father at the beach. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "It's evidence, honey," Linda said softly. "But when they're done with it, it's yours." Rachel nodded, tears filling her eyes. "It's weird," she whispered. "Something that hurt me so much is the only thing that can prove the truth." Downstairs, Morales briefed the Andersons on the legal process. The Department of Justice will pursue charges under Section 242 civil rights violation under color of law. "It's a strong case, but the union will fight. You'll be tested, publicly and privately." "We've been tested before," Mark said. "Not like this," she warned. "This time, the battlefield is public opinion." Later that evening, the first national newscast aired the story. The headline read, "Body. Cam footage contradicts officer's statement in shooting of Navy SEAL's daughter." The clip showed Rachel's silhouette holding the phone, the gunshot, the chaos that followed. The country saw what Mark and Linda already knew: that fear and bias had fired the trigger, not threat or reason. The phone lines exploded with messages of support and hate in equal measure. Veterans called Mark a hero. Others accused him of exploiting his daughter's pain for politics. He ignored them all. Justice, he'd learned, was rarely clean. 3 days later, Malloy was arrested. The footage, combined with the audio from Grant's body cam and the forensic data from the radio logs, made the case airtight. The district attorney, U.S. Attorney Michael Reed, stood before the press and declared, "We must hold accountable those who misuse the power entrusted to them. No badge is above the law." The words made headlines, but Mark didn't feel triumph, only a quiet, hollow relief. Justice was a slow machine, and its gears were still turning. In the weeks that followed, Rachel's recovery became the heart of a movement. The story of the girl with the phone sparked vigils and marches in small towns across the country. People carried candles, holding signs that read "See me before you shoot me." Linda attended one of them, speaking softly to a crowd of hospital workers and veterans. "My daughter's life was nearly ended by a split-second assumption," she said. "Assumption is not protection. Fear is not safety. We can do better than this." The crowd applauded, but her voice trembled as she stepped down. Afterward, she sat alone in the car, staring at her hands. Mark found her there, opening the passenger door. "You did good," he said. "I just told the truth. That's more than most do." The trial came months later. Courtroom packed, cameras outside. Malloy sat at the defense table, looking smaller than Mark remembered. His lawyer argued stress, fatigue, fear for life. The same words used in every case like this. But the footage didn't lie. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning. Guilty on all counts. Malloy's wife wept quietly as the verdict was read. He stared straight ahead, expression blank. Mark didn't gloat. He reached for Linda's hand under the table, gripping it until the judge pronounced the sentence 18 years without parole for 12. When they left the courthouse, the winter air smelled of salt and exhaust. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but Mark's voice was calm when he spoke. "This isn't revenge," he said. "It's accountability. There's a difference." That night, the family returned home. Rachel sat by the window, watching the moonlight touch the flag outside. "It still flies," she said quietly. "It does," Mark said. "Even when it's torn." "Are we safe now?" she asked. He hesitated. "Safer? Maybe that's enough for now." Over the following months, reforms rippled through the city. The chief resigned. Kevin Grant was promoted to sergeant and placed in charge of new training programs. He visited the Andersons one afternoon, standing awkwardly on the porch with a folder in hand. "They asked me to draft the new bias awareness curriculum," he said. "I wanted you to see the first page." Mark opened it. The title read, "The Rachel Protocol. Recognize. Assess. Confirm." Underneath, a line in small print. "Named in honor of Rachel Anderson, whose courage forced us to look closer." "She'll like that," Mark said, smiling faintly. When Grant left, Linda stepped beside him, slipping her hand into his. The sun was setting, turning the sky gold. "Do you think it changes anything?" she asked. "Not everything," he said. "But something. That's a start." As dusk settled, Rachel came outside, moving carefully, her sling finally gone. She leaned against the railing, breathing in the cool air. Maggie lay at her feet, old eyes watching the street. "I'm thinking of studying law," Rachel said suddenly. "Maybe justice needs people who remember what it feels like to wait for it." Mark smiled, pride and sorrow tangled in his chest. "You'd make a fine lawyer, kiddo. You already know the hardest part, the waiting." The sound of the ocean drifted up from the distance, soft and steady. Inside the house, the repaired wall gleamed faintly under the new paint, covering the scar that would never truly fade. For the first time since that night, Mark felt the weight lift just slightly. Justice hadn't shouted, it had whispered, and the country had finally listened. 18 months later, the Anderson house no longer felt haunted. The bullet hole, the police tape, the reporters, they had all become part of a memory that time had softened but not erased. On the porch, a new flag fluttered in the Atlantic breeze, bright and whole, its edges crisp against the morning light. The smell of salt and magnolia hung in the air. Inside, Mark Anderson adjusted the collar of his shirt, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror. His hair had gone grayer since that night, but his eyes, steady and sharp, hadn't changed. On the dresser behind him sat a framed photo of Rachel smiling, confident, her graduation gown a deep navy blue. Today was her first day of college orientation at the University of Virginia. She wanted to study criminal justice. "You look like you're preparing for inspection," Linda teased from the doorway. She held a travel mug of coffee and wore the same hospital scrubs she'd been wearing that night long ago, but now her expression carried peace instead of fear. "Old habits," Mark said. "Navy trained me to check every detail before a mission." "This isn't a mission, it's college drop-off," she said with a grin. "Although, knowing Rachel, you might need combat tactics." They shared a laugh, the kind that comes from surviving something too big for words. Down the hall, Rachel descended the stairs, backpack slung over her good shoulder. The scar on her other arm had faded to a pale line, but she no longer hid it. "You two are staring," she said. "Don't make it weird." "We're not staring," Linda said. "We're memorizing." Mark smiled. "She gets that sarcasm from you." "You wish." Linda shot back. Rachel rolled her eyes but smiled too. Maggie, now slower and grayer, followed her, tail wagging. The dog still slept by Rachel's door every night, as if guarding her from ghosts. They piled into the truck Mark driving, Rachel in the passenger seat, Linda behind them humming softly to an old Motown tune. The road curved along the coastline, morning sunlight catching the waves. The city had changed since that night. Police cruisers now carried a small emblem on their doors. A blue shield with the letters R.A. Rachel Anderson. Beneath it, the motto read, "Recognize, assess, confirm." The Rachel Protocol had become mandatory training across the state, then the country. News outlets occasionally called Mark the reluctant reformer, though he never liked the title. He didn't want fame, he wanted change. "How does it feel?" Rachel asked, glancing at one of the new patrol cars as they passed, seeing my name on those. Mark thought for a moment. "Strange," he said. "Proud. Sad. All at once. It feels weird to me too," she admitted. "Like it's not me. It's some other girl. But I guess if it helps someone else, then it's worth it." "It's worth it," Linda said quietly. They arrived at the campus, trees turning gold with the early fall. Volunteers waved new students toward the dorms. Rachel stepped out, stretching, excitement lighting her face. "I've got it from here," she said. "You sure?" Mark asked, though he already knew the answer. "Positive. I'm not a kid anymore." She hugged Linda first, then turned to her father. "You're still my hero, you know," she said softly. "Even if you hover too much." "Heroes are overrated," Mark replied, hugging her tight. "Just keep doing what's right. That's harder." As they drove away, Linda reached for his hand. "You did good, Commander." "We did good," he said. Back home, the day stretched quiet. Mark sat on the porch, the flag rippling above him, Maggie resting her head on his boots. He'd retired from active service 6 months earlier, channeling his energy into the Anderson Foundation for Police Integrity, a nonprofit working with military veterans and law enforcement agencies. He'd given speeches at community centers, church halls, even police academies. Every talk ended the same way with the words he'd said to the judge. "Accountability is not revenge. It's respect for the promise every officer makes when they wear the badge." That afternoon, Kevin Grant visited. He wore a plain suit now, his badge clipped to his belt. "Director of Community Relations," Mark said with a grin. "Look at you." Grant laughed. "Don't let the title fool you. It just means I argue with bureaucrats for a living." He set down a file folder. "We're expanding the Rachel Protocol nationwide. Federal funding just approved." "That's good news," Mark said. "It's more than good. It's working." Grant hesitated. "We still get pushback, of course. Some folks think it's overcorrection. But every time an officer pauses and checks before drawing a weapon, I think of that night." He looked toward the flag. "And of her." Mark nodded. "So do I. Every day." They talked a while longer about training programs, veteran outreach, and the slow grind of reform. When Grant left, the sun was dipping low, painting the porch in amber light. Linda stepped outside, sitting beside him on the steps. She handed him a glass of sweet tea. "You're quieter than usual," she said. "Just thinking." "About her?" "Always. About all of it." She leaned against his shoulder. "You know, I used to hate that porch light. After everything, I couldn't stand the flicker. It reminded me of the sirens. But now, when I see it glow at night, it feels different. Like we took back our home." Mark smiled faintly. "It's funny. I spent years fighting wars overseas to defend this country. Turns out the hardest battle was right here on our own porch." Linda squeezed his hand. "And you won it without firing a shot." They sat in silence for a while, the sound of waves carrying through the breeze. Across the street, Frank Davenport watered his lawn, slower now, his movements careful. He waved. Mark waved back. In the distance, church bells chimed, The familiar rhythm of a neighborhood healing. Later that evening, Mark went inside, opening the wooden box on his desk. Inside lay the cracked phone, its screen long dead, but he'd kept it as a reminder. He traced the spiderweb fracture with his thumb. "You broke the world open, kiddo," he murmured. He placed it back in the box, beside his medals. Different kinds of valor, side by side. The next morning, a letter arrived from the Department of Justice. It was formal but sincere acknowledgement of his contribution to law enforcement reform. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Section Chief Angela Coleman. "Some victories are quiet, Commander, but no less profound." He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the box with the phone. That evening, Rachel called from her dorm. "Hey, Dad," she said. "They want me to speak at the freshman seminar about resilience. Think that's ironic?" "No," he said. "It's perfect. I'm nervous." "Good," he replied. "It means you care." She laughed. "You always have the Navy answer for everything." "Old habits," he said. "Break a leg, counselor." After hanging up, he stepped outside once more. The sky was streaked with pink and gold. Maggie lay beside him, eyes half closed. The wind tugged gently at the flag. He thought about how life kept moving forward, one quiet choice at a time. Rachel was healing. Linda was steady. The world was a little less blind than it used to be. Maybe that was enough. As twilight deepened, he spoke softly, words carried by the wind. "I fought to defend the Constitution overseas. Turns out, sometimes you have to defend it on your own front porch." The flag above him rippled once more, proud and defiant. And in that moment, Mark Anderson knew that justice, though slow, though scarred, had finally come home.